Croeso, this is James, aka JP Harker, coming to you from Glamorgan in God's own country of Wales, with my first video for Authortube. I'm the only author on the internet who doesn't drink coffee, so I will periodically be drinking this delicious squash. That's probably going to happen a lot. So, without much further ado, let's carry on with the questions. We have 13 of them, so let's get started. Number 1, rather predictably, how did you find out about Authortube? Like most people, I found out about Authortube through BookTube. I watch a lot of BookTube channels. Eventually I found somebody who was a BookTuber and an AuthorTuber. I saw they were doing this and thought, I should probably do that. So I am. So, that's a fairly short and simple answer for you. Number 2, what genres do you write in? At the moment, I'm writing fantasy that's quite heavily grounded in real history. Fantasy is most of what I'm keen on. So, the current series I'm working on is a fantasy world but heavily influenced by real Iron Age Britain and Imperial Rome. I've done another short series set in the same world but in the medieval period that's got a sort of Norman Roman feel to it that's set about 800 years later. I'm also working on another series that's a bit more full-on fantasy with magic and flying eagles. Well, all eagles fly. Giant flying eagles and all that sort of thing, so I'm working on that in theory. And I've had a go at some urban fantasy. But for the most part, what I'm working on is historical fantasy type stuff. I'd love to do a book in Welsh, I really would, but mae fy Nghymraeg braidd yn rhydlyd, so it's not really up to standard. I can speak Welsh, but it's only conversational Welsh. I can't write in it the way I used to be able to in school, which is a shame, but maybe. Watch this space. Question number 3. What is your preferred tense, point of view, and category of story? Now, I've recently had a go at doing first-person, single point of view, urban fantasy, and I found it quite tricky. I don't tend to like first person. It's alright, I've seen some books that are written that way and I've enjoyed them, but I find it a bit trickier to write personally, so I'll keep having a go at that. But my first preference is always third person, multiple POV, and adult fantasy. That's what I feel most comfortable working with. When it comes to category of story, I would generally call my stuff adult fantasy. It is suitable for younger people, but it's suitable for mature younger people. It's suitable for younger people who like reading adult fantasy. So I don't like the term YA. I think it's too vague. So yeah, I just call it all adult fantasy, and then there's less room for doubt. Sorry, my camera's messing up. 1 second. That's made it better or worse, who knows. That's the answer to that one anyway. Question 4. Are you a plotter, a pantser, I thought that was panzer, sorry, or plantser? These are some strange words. Luckily, I'm the one that's the most sensible word, which is I'm a planner. I very rarely just sit down and write and don't really know where I'm going. That's very, very rare for me. I like to plan things, I like to have structure, and the story changes as it goes along, and the plan changes with it. But I do like structure. I don't tend to do well with just sit down, type, and see what happens. That's not really me. And does that make me less creative? Quite possibly. But I don't care. This is how I work. So, go me. Number 5. Are you self-published, traditionally published, or yet to be published? I am self-published, simply because I tried to get my books traditionally published and got told in no uncertain terms they're too long. Fantasy books tend to be long, I know, but I tend to write quite long books, and the agencies I approached, they all said, for an unknown author, no one's going to pick this up. Why don't you write something shorter? And I tried, and I failed. I'm not very good at writing short books. I'll try again at some point. But, yes, I self-published with the grand plan of, if I gain a readership from being self-published, I can then approach the traditionally publishing people and say, look, I'm not an unknown author anymore, publish my long books. That may be a stupid plan, I don't know. I'm going to have a crack at writing something shorter. Who knows? May work, may not. But at the moment, self-published, and I'm alright with it. Number 6. What agency, publisher, printing company, etc. are you represented by, or what would be your dream one to be represented? This question I'm sort of not going to bother with because I'm not represented by anyone, and I don't know enough about the companies and agencies that are out there to be able to comment intelligently about it. I've only looked into it a very little. I don't know enough to be able to say, this one's great, this one's not, so I'm sort of skipping that question. Number 7. What kind of Authortube videos can we expect to find on your channel? That's an excellent question, because I don't really know how this works. You'll be seeing some progress videos of how I'm going along, and a bit of the world building that I'm doing, and how the various series that I'm working on come about, and ideas and things like that. I'm already doing review videos every now and then of fictional books that I like, but I'll probably start looking at the research books as well, because I do a lot of research for my books because they're very grounded in real history. So I think having a look at some of the research I've done and saying, you'll find this useful if you're writing X, Y, or Z. Skip this if you're reading X, Y, or Z because it's not very informative, and save people a little bit of time, a little bit of money, stuff like that. You won't see a lot of here is the craft of writing stuff from me, or hints and tips like that, because I'm still learning. You know, I've written several books, I've put out several books, and they've had a good response. But that doesn't mean I'm in a position to tell you how writing works. You know, I've only been doing this for a few years, I've only written a few things. Give me time, I'll learn, I'll get this idea down, we'll have some ideas, we'll back and forth and all that jazz, but for now, don't expect there to be, here's how to write your book, here's how I plan, etc., etc., because I'm still working it out myself, so that's not what's going to be there. I've made a little note here, if any of my legions of fans have anything specific they would like to see on my channel, do please let me know. And for Legion, read Cohort, and for Cohort, read Small Group of Crazy Internet People who kind of like my work. But they're nice internet people, so that all works out nicely. So, hello to all of you. They're nice, really, but they're a small group of crazy people. Number 8. When did you start writing? Now, I feel like I must be an oddity, because so many of the other videos on here are saying, I started writing when I was 5, I've been writing for as long as I can remember, I was writing in this grade or that grade, I don't know how American schools work, but everyone seems to have been writing forever, and I haven't. I started getting interested in it in university. So, most of that time, I didn't write, I had no idea. And so, yes, I started writing when I was working at Hypervalue in university. Go Hypervalue. Me and a friend of mine, we were working on a comic book. It never really went anywhere, but I would write stories for it. A few years later, about 2 years later, I started trying to work on a book. It didn't work. I left it, I came back to it, I left it, I came back to it, and I back and forth for years until about 4 or 5 years ago, I finally knuckled down and wrote something. So, yes, I haven't been writing for a long, long time, but I've been procrastinating for years, and that's got to count for something. So, keep that in mind. Number 9. What is the first story you ever wrote? Well, assignments in school, obviously, but I don't think that really counts. So probably and this is drawing a smile for the wrong reasons, The Knights of Blood, which I am ever grateful that no one will ever read, because it's an attempt at a book written by a 21-year-old, and it was dire. It was absolutely awful. There was nothing redeemable in it anywhere. So, yeah, that was a good start. But I then tried writing something else which was only marginally bad, and then wrote something else that was almost good, and built my way up slowly from there to where I am now at the pretty good level. So, I'm happy with pretty good. That works. Number 10. What authors have inspired your writing the most? The two big ones will be Bernard Cornwell and Jim Butcher. Bernard Cornwell, best known for the Sharp books, but also for the, well, they're now called the Last Kingdom books. They used to be called the Warrior Chronicles and the Saxon Chronicles. But he writes historical fiction really, really well. He manages to make it very informative without making it dull, and really get you invested in the story, but it's full of little historical goodies, and I love that about his writing. So I'd love to write like Bernard Cornwell. Jim Butcher, for the fun of it, because he manages to write stuff that's very serious and very well thought out and very complicated, but there's fun all the way through it. So even in a book that will make you cry, you'll have been laughing through it as well. I love that about Jim Butcher's work. He's best known for the Dresden Files, but I fell in love with him when I read Codex Alera, and that's just a cracking series of books. Read them, they're brilliant. Oh yes. I have to say, there's a bit of Tolkien, because everyone has a bit of Tolkien if you write fantasy, that's unavoidable. There's probably a bit of George Martin now, because I did love Song of Ice and Fire. And there's a little bit of John le Carré, because I like John le Carré. So there's a little bit of influence from him. I like his way of doing things. So, yeah, I'd say those are my main influences. Them and, rest in peace to him, of course, David Gemmell, who, I know Tolkien's dead as well, but David Gemmell died more recently. And he was a brilliant writer, loved his work, and got into him in university, and very, very good. So yes, long rambling way of saying, those are the writers that I like and have influenced me. I'll try and keep the next answer a bit shorter. 11. Do you schedule... I'll try that again. Do you schedule your writing time, or do you write when you have the time? A bit of both. I don't have a set plan of, at this time I will write, but I tend to be free around the same sorts of times during the week. So that's when I tend to write. I tend to have about an hour between finishing work and having to cook. So that's my writing time, and I get a bit done at the weekend if I can. So it's not a schedule, but it's predictable the way I do it. You can't see from here, but I'm in my little desk under the stairs where I'm out of my wife's way, and I just huddle in here and just do what I can and try not to disturb. I know my place. Number 12. Do you use a typewriter, a computer? Do you handwrite everything, or a blend of these? Now, even I, with my 65-year-old soul in a 33-year-old body, do not use a typewriter. Why would you do that? If you're going to type into a word processor where you can edit more easily and save things. I do not understand modern writers who use typewriters. It just seems needless. Obviously, I handwrite things sometimes, but I don't handwrite prose or anything. I make notes, I jot them down, and I then type them. So it's 95% computer-based. That's fairly obvious, I think. Number 13. What are you most looking forward to now that you are on Authortube? Well, really, it's having other writers to talk to, because, no offence to them, the closest writing group to me is half an hour's drive away, and they meet late at night on a weeknight. And I have to get up at 5:30 every morning to go to work. So they're a nice bunch of people, and they're perfectly nice to talk to, but it's awkward getting to them. I don't see them very often, and that's the only writing group anywhere near me. So being able to interact with people who also write and who also know the sort of things that I am doing and will have similar experiences and advice and stories and complaining to do, they're the people that I would like to interact with a bit more, and the internet and Authortube seems to be the way to do that. I think we all know that writing is a very solo activity, but even introverts like us, we need a little bit of back and forth. We need to communicate with other humans sometimes, so that's mainly what I'm here for. This is only my second sip of squash as well. I'm quite impressed with myself. Another treat for you there. So, I've just written wrap up down here. So, to wrap up, if you would like to see more of my dashing face and hear more of my delightful Welsh vowels, then come here again and like and subscribe and all that jazz. Otherwise, to all other authors, hello. Please do chat. I will chat back. That's why I'm here. If I'm doing anything badly, do let me know. I'm not very good with cameras and technology and such like. But, yes, that's pretty much how I will sum things up. So, mwynhau darllen, enjoy your reading, and I'll try and include some more Welsh next time. I do need the practice. Happy reading, and farewell.